The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting golden hues over the small town of Everstead. It was a place where dreams often faded into routine, where ambition dulled under the weight of daily struggles. But for one young man, Lucas today, was different. Today, he would change his life. Lucas had always been a dreamer. Ever since he was a child, he had envisioned himself doing something great, something beyond the dusty roads of Everstead, beyond the fields his father had tilled for decades. But dreams alone were not enough. Year after year, he watched his aspirations drift further away as he worked long hours at the family store, helping his mother stock shelves, counting coins, and listening to the endless chatter of customers. Wanted more. One evening, after another exhausting day, Lucas found himself sitting by the riverbank, watching the water rush past. His best friend Maya sat beside him. Unlike Lucas, Maya was a doer. She had left Everstead a year ago for college and had returned for the summer, full of stories about the outside world. "Lucas," she said, breaking the silence, "why are you still here?" He sighed. "Because I have responsibilities. Because leaving isn't easy." "Nothing worth doing is easy," she replied. "If you want something, you have to fight for it." Lucas knew she was right. Deep inside, a fire burned, one that he had tried to ignore for too long. That night, he made a promise to himself. He would take the first step toward his dream, no matter how difficult it was. The next morning, he packed a small bag, took his savings, and walked toward the bus station. His parents didn't understand at first, but his mother, with tears in her eyes, pressed a note into his hand. "For when you need strength," she whispered. As the bus pulled away, Lucas looked out at the only home he had ever known. Fear clawed at his chest, but excitement raced through his veins. This was his moment, his beginning. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was ready to find out. The bus rumbled along the highway, carrying Lucas further from everything he had ever known. He watched as the familiar countryside of Everstead faded into a blur, replaced by vast open roads stretching toward the horizon. The uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at him, but he held on to his mother's note still unopened, as a reminder that he was not alone. The journey was long, and Lucas found himself lost in thought. Was this the right decision? Was he foolish for leaving behind security for a dream that had no clear path? Doubt whispered in his ear, but he clenched his fists. He had made his choice, and he was going to see it through. Hours later, the bus pulled into the heart of the city, a place so vast and alive that it overwhelmed his senses. Towering skyscrapers stretched into the sky, flashing lights illuminated the streets, and people moved with purpose, their faces set with determination. Lucas had never seen anything like it. Stepping off the bus, he took a deep breath. This was where he would start his journey. But where? How? He had no job, no connections, just a dream and a few $100s in his pocket. The city did not care about dreams. It demanded action. Lucas found a cheap hostel where he could stay for a few nights. The room was small, the mattress stiff, but it didn't matter. He had a roof over his head, and that was enough for now. That night, he finally unfolded his mother's note. Her familiar handwriting brought a lump to his throat. "Lucas, no matter where you go, remember who you are. The world will challenge you, but your heart is strong. Keep moving forward. Love, Mom." A deep sense of resolve filled him. He was here. For a reason. Tomorrow he would begin his search, not just for a job, but for his purpose. The city was big. The journey was uncertain, but Lucas was ready to face whatever came next. Morning in the city was a different kind of chaos. The streets buzzed with hurried footsteps, honking cars, and the aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of rain-soaked pavement. Lucas stepped out of the hostel with his backpack slung over, one shoulder, his heart pounding. Today he would find work, but reality struck hard. The first place he walked into, a small diner on the corner, barely looked at his resume before shaking their head. "No experience? Sorry, kid." The next, a bookstore, was looking for someone with a background in retail. By midday, rejection had become a pattern. Over and over the same responses. We're not hiring. You're not qualified. Try somewhere else. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the night before. He found a street vendor and bought a sandwich, counting every cent carefully. His savings wouldn't last long. As he sat on a bench, exhaustion creeping in, Maya's words echoed in his mind. Nothing worth doing is easy. Lucas straightened his shoulders. He had left home for this. He wouldn't quit now. He spent the rest of the afternoon going door to door, asking for any opportunity. A grocery store owner finally gave him a chance, but only for a temporary job stacking shelves. The pay was barely enough to cover his hostel fee, but it was something. His first shift started that evening. The work was tedious. His arms ached from lifting boxes, and the hours stretched longer than he expected. As he walked back to the hostel under the city lights, exhaustion threatened to pull him down. But as he collapsed onto the stiff mattress, a small smile tugged at his lips. It was just a small step, but it was his. Tomorrow he would do better. The days blurred into a cycle of early mornings and late nights. Lucas worked tirelessly at the grocery store, stacking shelves, unloading deliveries, and sweeping floors long after the last customers had left. It wasn't the dream he had envisioned, but it was a start. Every night he returned to the hostel exhausted, his hands sore from the day's labor, but he refused to let fatigue define him. Instead, he spent his late hours searching for something more, something that would bring him closer to the life he wanted. One evening, as he scrolled through job listings at the hostel's common room, a voice interrupted him. "You looking for something better?" Lucas turned to see a man, probably in his late 20s, leaning against the table. His clothes were neat but casual, his presence confident. "Yeah," Lucas admitted. "I just got here. I want to do something bigger than stacking shelves." The man smirked. "Everyone who comes to this city says that. Most give up before they find their way." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "I won't." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Good. Name's Daniel. I work at a small marketing firm. We need an extra hand for office work. Nothing fancy, just filing papers, answering calls. It won't make you rich, but it's better than what you've got now." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. It wasn't exactly what he was looking for, but it was a step closer. An opportunity. "When can I start?" Daniel chuckled. "Come by tomorrow. If you can handle it, we'll see where it leads." That night, Lucas barely slept. For the first time since arriving in the city, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. Morning came quickly, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. He thanked the grocery store owner for the chance he had been given, then set off toward his new beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Lucas had learned one thing. As long as he kept pushing forward, doors would open, and he was ready to walk through them. Lucas stepped into the marketing firm's small but bustling office, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. Unlike the grocery store, where the air smelled of fresh produce and cleaning supplies, this place carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee and printer ink. The walls were lined with whiteboards filled with scribbled ideas, and employees tapped furiously at their keyboards, their faces set in concentration. Daniel greeted him with a nod. "Glad you showed up. Let's see if you can keep up." Lucas was given a desk, bare except for a phone, a notepad, and a stack of papers that needed organizing. "Start with these," Daniel instructed, already turning to leave. Lucas wasted no time. He sorted the files, answered a few phone calls, fumbling through his words at first, and observed how the office operated. It was overwhelming but exciting. By lunchtime, his head was spinning. He sat in the break room, replaying every mistake he had made that morning. He had misdirected a call, knocked over a coffee cup, and struggled with the office printer. He felt out of place. Then, he heard a chuckle. "Rough first day?" A woman about his age sat across from him, stirring her coffee. Her name tag read, "Sophie." Lucas sighed. "You have no idea," she grinned. "I actually do. My first day here, I printed 50 copies of a blank page. Daniel still won't let me live it down." Lucas laughed, tension easing from his shoulders. So you're saying there's hope for me? Only if you survive the week. She winked before heading back to her desk. Encouraged, Lucas pushed through the rest of the day. He learned quickly how to transfer calls properly, how to take detailed notes, and most importantly, how to listen. By the time he clocked out, he was exhausted but satisfied. He had stumbled, yes, but he had also stood back up. As he walked back to his hostel, he glanced at the city lights, feeling something he hadn't in a long time. He belonged here, and this was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Lucas adapted quickly. He learned the rhythm of the office, the way deadlines made people move faster, the tension in the air before an important client meeting, and the quiet hum of ambition that fueled everyone around him. He no longer fumbled with phone calls, and he had mastered the art of keeping files organized. But deep down, he knew he wanted more. Filing papers wasn't his dream. One evening, as he packed up for the day, he overheard a conversation between Daniel and another colleague, Mark. "We need a fresh approach for the Baxter campaign," Mark said, frustration in his voice. "Everything we've pitched so far has been rejected." Lucas hesitated. He had been quietly observing how campaigns were planned, how ideas were born from brainstorming sessions. His mind had already been buzzing with thoughts about the Baxter campaign. He just wasn't sure if he had the right to speak up. But then he remembered why he had come here. Taking a deep breath, he turned toward them. "What if you tried something different?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Lucas swallowed his nerves. "I've been looking at Baxter's ads. They focus too much on selling, but their audience wants something personal. What if you made it about storytelling instead? Show real people using their product, not just polished models." Silence. Mark studied him. "You're the new assistant, right?" Lucas nodded, bracing himself for dismissal. Instead, Daniel smirked. "That's actually not a bad idea." Mark scratched his chin. "It's risky, but it might be what we need. I'll bring it up in the next meeting." Lucas couldn't believe it. He had spoken up, and they had listened. That night, as he walked home, something burned inside him. This was what he wanted. Not just a job, but a place where his ideas mattered. For the first time, he didn't just feel like someone passing through. He felt like he was becoming someone. The next morning, Lucas walked into the office with a mix of excitement and nerves. His idea had been acknowledged, but would it actually be used? Would they really take a chance on something suggested by the office assistant? He got his answer when Daniel stopped by his desk. "Meeting in 15 minutes, he said. "You're coming." Lucas's heart pounded. "Me?" "You pitched the idea. Let's see if you can defend it." Lucas barely had time to collect his thoughts before he was ushered into the conference room. The atmosphere was tense. Executives in suits sat around a long glass table, murmuring about budgets and deadlines. Mark was already there, flipping through slides on a large screen. Lucas took a deep breath. "This is it." Mark introduced the campaign's problems and then glanced at Lucas. "We've been struggling to connect with Baxter's audience, but one of our own had an interesting perspective on it." All eyes turned to Lucas. He felt the weight of their expectations, but he couldn't back down now. "Baxter's current ads are polished," he began, keeping his voice steady, "but they don't feel real. Customers don't just want to see the product, they want to see themselves in it. What if we focus on real people, real stories? Show a struggling student using their service, a small business owner finding success because of it. Make it personal." Silence. Then one of the executives nodded. "That's actually compelling." Another leaned forward. "How do we make that happen?" Mark picked up from there, translating Lucas's idea into actionable strategies. By the time the meeting ended, the campaign had a new direction, one built around Lucas's concept. As people filed out of the room, Daniel clapped him on the back. "Not bad, rookie." Lucas felt a surge of pride. He had just contributed to something real, something bigger than himself. For the first time since stepping into this office, he wasn't just a helper. He was part of the team. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Lucas was no longer just the office assistant. He was now involved in real work. Though he wasn't officially part of the creative team, Mark and Daniel started calling him into brainstorming sessions, asking for his input. He spent late nights studying past campaigns, dissecting what worked and what didn't. He read about marketing strategies, storytelling techniques, and consumer psychology. He wanted to prove that his success wasn't luck. It was just the beginning, but with opportunity came pressure. One afternoon, Mark threw a thick folder onto Lucas's desk. "Since you have good instincts, let's see how well you can handle research. We need data on consumer behavior trends for the Baxter campaign." Lucas nodded, determined. "I'll get it done." What he didn't expect was just how overwhelming the task would be. The documents were dense, filled with charts, and technical jargon he barely understood. Every time he thought he grasped something, another term would throw him off. Doubt crept in. What if this was too much? What if he wasn't ready for this level of work? Sophie noticed his frustration. "You okay?" "I'm trying," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "But I don't know if I'm smart enough for this," she smiled. "You think Mark and Daniel knew everything on their first try? No one does. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't is that the successful ones keep going." Lucas let her words sink in. That night, instead of giving up, he found online tutorials, watched videos, and took notes. He broke the data down piece by piece until it made sense. The next morning, he walked into the office with a detailed report, filled with insights that even Mark found impressive. "You actually went deep on this," Mark said, flipping through the pages. Lucas grinned. "Told you I'd get it done." Daniel smirked. "Looks like we might need to upgrade your role soon." Lucas felt something shift inside him. He had pushed through doubt and proven to himself and others that he was capable, and he was just getting started. Lucas had stepped into a world he once thought was beyond him. He was no longer just an assistant. He was proving himself, one task at a time. His ideas had weight, his research had impact, and he had earned the respect of his colleagues. But success came with new challenges. One morning, Mark pulled Lucas aside. "The Baxter campaign is taking shape, but we need a fresh presentation for the executives. Think you can put something together?" Lucas hesitated. "You mean me?" "Unless you suddenly forgot how to create a solid pitch," Mark said with a smirk. "You've got a knack for this. Show us what you can do." Lucas felt excitement and fear collide. This was his moment, but also his biggest responsibility yet. He spent the next few days crafting the presentation, ensuring every slide told story. He refined the messaging, making it less about statistics and more about impact. He rehearsed in front of the mirror at the hostel, picturing the executives in the room. But as the day of the presentation arrived, doubt clawed at him. What if I freeze? What if they hate it? Before stepping into the conference room, he caught Sophie's encouraging nod from across the office. Daniel patted his back as he walked in. "You got this." The room was filled with sharp-eyed executives, their gazes expectant. Lucas took a deep breath and began. He didn't just present numbers, he told a story. He painted a picture of a struggling small business finding success through Baxter's services. He spoke about connection, emotion, and why this campaign mattered. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then one of the executives smiled. "This is exactly what we needed." Lucas barely registered the rest of the meeting. All he knew was that he had done it. As he stepped out of the room, Daniel grinned. "You keep this up, and you won't be the assistant much longer." Lucas felt something deep inside shift. He had broken through another barrier, and he was ready for whatever came next. The success of the Baxter campaign changed everything. Lucas was no longer just the office assistant. He was now the guy people turned to for ideas. Mark started inviting him to more meetings. Daniel let him sit in on strategy discussions, and even the senior team acknowledged his work. One afternoon, Mark called him into his office. "Close the door." Lucas sat down, nerves tingling. "You've proven yourself," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. "You're sharp, hard-working, and you get what we do here. It's time we make things official." Lucas's heart pounded. "We're offering you a junior marketing role. It's not a big salary jump, but it's a real start. You in?" Lucas could barely believe it. Just months ago, he was stocking shelves. Now he was being offered a position in a field he never thought he'd belong to. "I'm in," he said without hesitation. Mark smirked. "Good. Now get ready, because this is where the real work begins." That night, as Lucas walked through the city, he let the moment sink in. He had fought for this every late night, every doubt, every challenge. It had all led him here. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something real, and for the first time in his life, he felt unstoppable. The first few weeks in his new role were a whirlwind. Lucas was no longer the rookie. He was part of the team, expected to bring fresh ideas and solutions. The pressure was intense, but Lucas thrived on it. He had always believed that success was earned through hard work, but now he was learning that growth came from embracing challenges, not running from them. His days were filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and client calls. He was more involved in the creative process than ever before, and his input was being taken seriously. It wasn't easy. There were moments when he felt like he was drowning in responsibilities, but he had learned one key thing. You don't grow when things are easy. You grow when things push you to your limits. He started spending his evenings not just working, but learning. He read books on marketing strategy, attended online webinars, and even started a journal to track his personal growth. The more he learned, the more confident he became in his abilities. One afternoon, as Lucas sat at his desk, Daniel approached with a serious expression. "I need you to take the lead on a new campaign," he said. Lucas blinked. "Me? Are you sure? I've never led anything before." "You've got the vision," Daniel replied, "and the team trusts you. It's your time." A wave of excitement mixed with anxiety rushed over Lucas. He had worked hard to get here, but now the real test was in front of him. Could he really take the reins? But then he remembered the countless nights when he had almost given up. He remembered how far he'd come, from stacking shelves to leading a campaign. This was his chance to prove he could do even more. He took a deep breath. "I'm ready." The pressure of leading his first campaign was heavier than Lucas had anticipated. There were deadlines to meet, clients to impress, and a team to manage. It was one thing to have ideas. It was another to execute them and bring others along for the ride. In the beginning, Lucas was nervous. He was still learning the ropes of managing people, figuring out how to balance creative freedom with the tight expectations of clients. The team members who had once been his peers now looked to him for direction. They trusted him, but Lucas couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. What if I fail? What if they think I'm not cut out for this? His team had their own strengths. Sophie, the creative thinker; Mark, the strategist; Daniel, the manager. Lucas was the connector. His role was to tie it all together. At first, the communication felt clumsy. Ideas clashed. Deadlines were missed. The pressure of the project weighed heavily on the group, and Lucas found himself taking on more than he could handle, trying to keep everything running smoothly. It wasn't the smooth, confident operation he had imagined. Then, one evening, Sophie pulled him aside. "Hey, you're doing great, but you need to delegate. You can't do it all yourself." Lucas swallowed his pride. "I just don't want to let anyone down." "You won't," she reassured him. "But you have to trust the team. We're all in this together." That night, Lucas took a hard look at his leadership style. He realized that he had been so focused on proving himself that he had forgotten the most important thing: collaboration. Leadership wasn't about doing everything. It was about inspiring others to do their best. The next day, Lucas called a team meeting. "We're all in this together," he said, his voice steady. "Let's talk about what we need from each other to make this work." The shift was subtle but immediate. Sophie shared new ideas that took the campaign to fresh, creative heights. Mark reevaluated the strategy to improve efficiency. Daniel guided the project toward its deadline, keeping the client's expectations at the forefront. And Lucas, he learned to trust, to listen, to lead without feeling like he had to carry it all on his own. It was a humbling lesson, but one that would stick with him forever. As the campaign neared its final stages, Lucas felt the weight of his responsibility more than ever. There were still obstacles, small but nagging details that threatened to unravel the work they'd done. A late-night email from a client raised concerns about the visuals. One of the team members was struggling with burnout, and the clock was ticking. But this time, Lucas wasn't overwhelmed. He had learned how to breathe through the pressure, how to stay calm when things got tough. He walked into the office the next morning with a clear plan, ready to tackle whatever came next. He started by addressing the team. Listen, I know we're all feeling the stress, but we're almost there. If we push through this together, we're going to make something amazing. And if anyone needs help, I'm here. We're a team. No one gets left behind. The words sounded simple, but Lucas knew they were true. He had learned what it truly meant to be a leader, not just a decision maker, but a source of support and encouragement for the people who relied on him. Sophie and Mark nodded, the stress easing off their shoulders. Daniel joined the conversation, offering his own reassurance. We'll make it work, let's do this. That day, Lucas went into problem-solving mode. He worked with the designer to adjust the visuals, ensuring they aligned with the client's expectations. He delegated tasks based on each person's strengths, offering a listening ear to the team member who had been feeling overwhelmed. As the final deadline loomed, the team came together in a way Lucas had never imagined. There was no chaos, no rushing to meet last-minute demands. Instead, there was collaboration, focused, determined, and calm. The campaign launched successfully, and the feedback from the client was overwhelmingly positive. For Lucas, it wasn't just the victory of delivering a great project. It was the realization that he had truly stepped into the role of a leader. He had earned the trust of his team, and in turn, had trusted them to do their best. As Lucas sat back in his office chair, watching the congratulatory emails and messages flood in, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. The road from a hesitant assistant to a confident leader had been full of challenges, but each step had brought him closer to who he wanted to become. The campaign was a success, but Lucas knew the real work was just beginning. The company had noticed his progress, and whispers of his leadership abilities were starting to spread. One day, Daniel called him into his office. "Close the door," Daniel said with a knowing smile. Lucas sat down, his heart racing a little. Was this the moment where he'd be handed an even bigger responsibility? "You've done something incredible with that campaign," Daniel began. "The client is thrilled, and the team is stronger because of your leadership. I think it's time we start thinking about your future here." Lucas's mind raced. Could he really be looking at another promotion? A bigger role? "We want to move you up to senior manager," Daniel continued. "There's more responsibility, more influence on strategy, and bigger projects coming your way. But I'm confident you're ready for it." Lucas's breath caught. He had worked for this moment, but hearing it out loud made everything feel more real. This was the chance he had always dreamed of, an opportunity to lead on a larger scale. "You've got the skills," Daniel added. "But what I want to know is, are you ready to take on the next challenge?" Lucas sat for a moment, his mind racing through everything he had learned over the past months. There had been doubts, there had been struggles, but there had also been growth. Growth he was proud of. He met Daniel's gaze, his voice steady. "I'm ready." It was the answer Lucas had always hoped to give, but now it felt like more than just a response. It was the culmination of every lesson learned, every struggle overcome. The road ahead would be harder, but Lucas knew that he had the resilience to face whatever came next. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that office all those months ago. And the future? It was his to shape. The days following the promotion were a whirlwind. Lucas dove into his new role with the same passion and determination that had carried him this far. His responsibilities grew. He was now leading larger teams, managing high-profile clients, and making key decisions on company strategy. Every day brought new challenges, but Lucas was no longer intimidated. The confidence he had built over the last year was now his foundation. He had come to realize that the true essence of success wasn't about avoiding mistakes or always having the right answer. It was about facing each obstacle with the belief that it was possible to overcome it, learning from every experience, and using failure as fuel for growth. One evening, after a particularly challenging meeting, Lucas sat in the office, reflecting on everything that had led him to this point. It wasn't the end of the road, far from it. This was just another milestone. Sophie walked into the room, offering a cup of coffee. "You doing okay?" Lucas smiled, taking the cup from her. "Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come." "You've come a long way, Lucas," Sophie said, leaning against the desk. "Remember when you were just the assistant? Look, at you now." Lucas chuckled. "I've come a long way, but I know there's still a lot to learn." Sophie nodded. "That's the key. Never stop learning." As he sipped his coffee, Lucas realized that he wasn't just climbing a corporate ladder. He was evolving as a person. Every challenge, every success, and even every setback had shaped him into a better leader, a more capable professional, and a more confident individual. He had learned that leadership wasn't about being the loudest in the room or having all the answers. It was about listening, trusting your team, and knowing when to step up and when to step back. It was about having the courage to fail and the strength to keep moving forward. And as he looked out the window, watching the city come alive with the fading light of the day, Lucas knew this was just the beginning. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. With every step, Lucas was learning to embrace the unknown, because he now knew that no matter what came his way, he was ready. He had proven to himself that he could rise to any challenge, and that was a power no one could take from him.